Hi there, and thank you all for coming. My name is Sarah Byrne-Martelli, and I'm a member of the Executive Board. So this session is Serving the Most Vulnerable Among Us, the Orthodox Response to Victims of Human Trafficking in Our Congregations. And it's presented by Emily Waters. I'll let her introduce herself more thoroughly. I see she's a licensed clinical social worker and a doctoral candidate. And she's the Director of Human Trafficking Programs for the SAFE Center in Long Island, New York, and a member of the Church of Our Lady of Kazan, OCA Church in Seacliff, New York. Thank you. Go ahead.
Thank you. Is the level okay? All right. Thank you for coming. My name is Emily. I have worked in the human trafficking field for the last 12 years, primarily overseas, about half now back in the U.S. I currently run all the human trafficking programs for Nassau County in Long Island, New York. We run safe housing. We run the court programs, we do counseling, we do outreach, and we have the Child Advocacy Center for the county, so any child that is indicated of any type of sexual assault or red flag for trafficking gets seen by myself and my team. So we're usually around 700 cases per year. I also work for the State Department as a human trafficking subject matter expert. And I am a professor at Long Island University teaching master's degree level social work and clinical mental health counseling students. I am also a survivor of trafficking. So the subject is very personal to me. And I am going to speak to you like I speak to the people I go to church with, like I speak to my colleagues and my friends. So you may have to bleep out some of what gets said before you put it up online. I believe in being very authentic and real, and sometimes that includes profanity and things that you don't normally hear at a church conference. But that's who I am. So my church, Our Lady of Kazan, has been a phenomenal support in the past few years with my journey, not only in faith, but my journey in my work. Over the last year, we have had a very large media campaign in New York talking about human trafficking and the issues with the opioid crisis that we have on Long Island. A lot of the interviews were done with me, both as an expert on the subject matter and about my personal story, and got to deal with some very interesting reporters who had no boundaries. So my church and my congregation has been a phenomenal support with that, and I hope that that's something that can be replicated in other congregations. So, I don't like to listen to myself talk a lot. What is human trafficking? Somebody.
Money for kids promoting sex.
Absolutely.
Creating a situation where vulnerable people are stuck or subject or sort of not in control of where they are or what they're doing or where they're living, and being moved around or used for any number of purposes, I guess I would say.
Very good. Nobody mentioned the movie Taken. Thank you. I spend about half of my work with the media trying to dispel that myth. Everybody knows what that movie is?
No.
Yeah.
Really?
What is the movie? I don't know it.
It's, I would say, 10 years old. Liam Neeson.
It's about 10 years.
Yeah, Liam Neeson, daughter goes to Paris, gets abducted. I have the particular set of skills, that quote. And that kind of, about 10 years ago when that movie came out, was when human trafficking really started to become a hot button issue in the media. So everyone that thought that the blonde, white girl from a well-to-do family gets abducted and sold into sex slavery, and that's human trafficking. Now, when I worked in Europe, yeah, there's some of that. That's not what it looks like in the U.S. In the 6-7 years I've been back stateside, guess how many kidnapping cases that I've had? Somebody give me a number. 7. That's not what it looks like here. So talking a little bit about what makes someone vulnerable to trafficking, and then we're going to go to the legal definition. No, please.
Poverty,
Absolutely. Poverty,
homelessness,
homelessness, runaways.
lack of education,
Being addicted.
Absolutely. Often where there is system involvement. So there's a kid that's been in the foster care system, or there's a 18-year-old who's aging out of the foster care system or aging out of a group home, and the family's not really something that they can go back to. So child sexual abuse is a huge predictor. There's also a lack of love and affection, or what that should properly look like at home. So you have 2 types of pimps. You have 2 types of traffickers. You have the boyfriend pimp, which is 85% of what we see nationwide. The other is called the guerrilla pimp, GU. And that's the more force. Not always kidnapping, but that's more what you're going to see with gangs. The Romeo pimp, the boyfriend pimp, is the one who's going to see the 15-year-old walking home from school who maybe doesn't have the nicest clothes, maybe has bruises on their face because they got beat up by their family, and they're going to pull over and ask if they want to go to McDonald's, if they want to go to Starbucks, buy them something, buy them clothes, buy them food, spend time and attention. Because if we look at, who knows Maslow's hierarchy of needs? Okay? Love and affection is something that we are biologically created to need and to crave. And if we don't get that at home, we're going to look for it somewhere else. It's what, as human beings, we are designed to do. So if someone's not getting that at home, and then somebody starts offering that, initially they're just going to spend time investing in that person. Investing is also called grooming. Get that person to fall in love with them. Get that person to engage in sex with them. And then it's, well, we're getting to a really tight spot financially. If you can just do this one time, we won't have to do it again. And then we're going to have a nice life. We'll get us a house. We'll get us a happy family. We'll have some kids. It's the same story over and over. But it's never just one time. Then it's a second person, a third person, and on and on. If drugs get introduced, that's a different level. We're going to go into that in a second. My favorite part. What do you think the buyers of sex look like? So the people who purchase sex across the board, whether it's from kids or whether it's from adults. There was a wonderful study done out of the University of Portland in 2017 that gave some fantastic numbers.
Middle-aged businessmen.
Absolutely.
What is it?
Middle-aged businessmen, so 60%, 40 or above, 70% wife and kids, 83% master's degree or higher, 60% making over $100,000 a year. What words does that bring to mind? Predator? What?
Predator.
Mm-hmm. What else?
I said, oh shit.
Yep. Entitled?
He answered like the top, like success, like America's, like people who are sort of leading.
From male privilege.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
To an extreme degree.
Mm-hmm. And they're people who can afford attorneys.
Yeah.
So you're going to need to bleep this one in a minute. I apologize. So here in the U.S., in most states, if you get arrested for solicitation for someone who is the age of consent or older, you get between a $250 and $500 fine, and you have to go to an 8-hour, what's called John's School. That's a 8-hour session usually held at the courthouse, where you're basically told it's a bad idea to purchase sex. If you happen to purchase the services of someone who is under the age of consent, the penalties are higher. But it's really easy to explain $250 to $500 missing to your wife and kids from your bank account if you make 6 figures a year. It's easier to explain 1 day of paid time off or sick leave to go to this school. So 3 years ago in Norway, they implemented a new program that dropped the rate of buying sex of adult women by 80%. Guess what they did? They impound the damn car. They take the car away and you don't get it back. It's a lot harder to explain where the minivan went. So that's my favorite statistic. So the technical part, force, fraud, and coercion is what needs to be proven in order to force or fraud or coercion. Let me clarify. Is what needs to be proved in order to prosecute a human trafficking case. This is insanely difficult to do. For children who are under the age of consent, it is still insanely difficult to do. We recently just got 4 men indicted for a group of girls that was 11 through 14. We worked on that case for 9 months before we could make the arrest to get the amount of evidence that was required. Coercion is the hardest factor to prove, and it's the factor that comes up the most. So coercion, through new legislation and under New York law, has a special dispensation now for drug use. That if a trafficker gets their victim addicted to drugs and then threatens to withhold those drugs if they do not perform the sex acts that they're being told to do, that has now a special flag that it will automatically be considered sex trafficking, because that is threatening life and that is threatening health. Because usually what we're dealing with is heroin or benzos, and if you take that away, they will die, depending on the dose that they are used to. If they are cut off initially, they're going to cut off immediately, they're going to get really sick, or they're going to die. So it's legislation that we had to work very hard to get through. Other issues with prosecuting these cases. Someone mentioned earlier in the presentation earlier in this room, trauma is not linear. Who's seen what an EKG looks like? Blip. So when a single trauma event happens, imagine a blip in your brain. Then when you remember that trauma, your brain automatically goes back to the age at which that trauma happened. So you will hear different inflections in voice. You will see body posture and affect change. Now imagine childhood sexual abuse, physical abuse, neglect, homelessness, child sex trafficking, being trafficked as an adult for sex, and drug addiction. How many blips do you think those are? And trying to put together a narrative timeline on that is almost non-existent. I train the brand new police cadets. I do quarterly trainings for our detectives. I train all of our new clinicians. And you gotta say, we can't do that. It is psychologically impossible, at least without years of work. We can get some things, and we can put some things together enough to build the case that you need, but we are not going to be able to lay out an A to Z timeline. It takes, bless you, it takes a lot of healing, bless you, and a lot of work to get to that point. Let's let my on. All right, adverse childhood experiences. Getting nods, awesome. Okay, so, real quick version of this is score of 4 or more, 60% chance of increased earlier death, increased chance of alcoholism, drug addiction, cancer. All bad things happen if you have an ACE score of 4 or more. Adverse childhood experience scores take into account things that happen under the age of 18. So parental incarceration, parental abuse or abuse between parental figures, childhood abuse, sexual abuse, etc., etc. What do you think the average ACE score of a victim of sex trafficking is? 8. Want to guess what mine is? 10. So, window of tolerance. Does that, I got any clinicians in the room? All right. You know this one?
It makes sense what it would be of just like your threshold of what your response.
Yeah.
So if you have lots of negative experiences in your past, what you are able to tolerate before you react is less.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So the window of tolerance can also be put into layman's terms as, you know, fight, flight, or freeze. Mm-hmm. Okay? I'm going to move this for a minute and try not to break anything. All right. Up here, hyperarousal, that's the either fight or flight response depending on your reaction. Hypoarousal, that's the freeze response. There's also new research that's going to be coming out, well, it's supposed to be coming out later this year, now hopefully mid-next year, that's going to add a fourth to that, which is fight, flight, freeze, or dissociate. And not looking at dissociation as a negative aspect, but looking at it as a protective factor. So if you also think of the window of tolerance in a form of little t trauma to big T trauma to complex trauma to holy shit, what are we dealing with? Most of the victims that I work with are way down here. So domestically, I've worked with as young as 6 Internationally, I've worked with as young as 18 months. So, one other thing about this window of tolerance. Yep, right side. It makes treating victims for clinicians who are inexperienced extremely difficult and extremely dangerous. Because if you get someone who comes out of trafficking trying to get clean, if there's a drug addiction issue, having gone through multiple traumas, having gone through a repeated pattern of up and down as a survival mechanism, how is that person going to present? So I'll give you an example, and I'll go into this a little bit more on the next slide. When I got out, I initially went into a program for drug addiction, and I had to take, I think they still use the Minnesota multiphasic? MMPI? Yeah. So that was fun. Diagnosed with schizophrenia, bipolar 1, several other things, and given a lot of medication that I should not have been on. What was being shown was I was detoxing from methamphetamine. I'm not going to come across as normal. I'm not going to come across as normal now. B, severe childhood abuse. You know, I had to fight for my life pretty much every day from when I was adopted to when I got out of my parents' house at 17, and then I was trafficked. So me coming and talking to people and them trying to place a diagnosis on it back in 2001 when complex PTSD was not a thing, all they know what to do is throw medication at it. Fortunately, when I started my PhD, and all that stuff stopped a long time ago, fortunately, but when I started my PhD, I did have to get the special accommodation for dyslexia. And I retook the MMPI just for fun. And yeah, that was definitely not the case anymore. Anxiety and PTSD, everything else is good. So, I make notes because I change the presentations all the time.
I found in my work many years with many different populations is that a lot of extreme trauma survivors are given multiple diagnoses. That's very common, and often it's because of the dissociative issues that after therapy and detox are dealt with, and once dissociation is integrated, then you don't see pieces of a borderline, pieces of a bipolar, and pieces of a schizophrenic. All of that is systemic in a dissociative state as a byproduct of trauma.
Absolutely.
You cure or you help the person cure their dissociation, and all of that goes away.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
But the danger in trauma workers is not to remember who's who. Because it's your gift is your suffering. But it can also be an Achilles heel because there can be a danger of over-identification with the client.
Very
for
much so.
all of us in the helping fields.
Absolutely. Absolutely. That's a fantastic point.
So it's a
Absolutely.
thin line to walk.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Very much is. With dissociation as well, I'll say for me, it's not gone away completely. It's a lot better. I mean, it's miles better than it used to be. It'll creep up every now and then, but there are ways, and there's some therapeutic modalities I'll mention in a minute that work very well with integrating the longer lasting dissociative pieces to where it's not a split, it's more of a pause to bring it back together, if that makes sense. So I'll say this. When I came, so raised an atheist, I was married to someone who was very fundamentalist. And I never told him or his family about the trafficking. They knew how severely mentally ill my mother was. They met her while she was still alive. And they knew some of the background of the abuse that had happened when I was younger. And I remember being told frequently, and I mean, these people had their own issues, but I remember being told frequently how lucky I was to find somebody that didn't think of me as used goods, that didn't think of me as broken, and how lucky I was to find someone who was willing to marry me. And so the night that I was, well, not that night, but the first time I tried to leave my traffickers, I got my neck broken. I got stabbed a few times. I was pregnant at the time, ended up miscarrying, and ended up not being able to carry a child again. So the shame and guilt that was put upon me that was my fault by all the people in the church, not just that family, but by the people in the church, as those kind of people gossip, I guess, was just such a turnoff. So I grew up atheist, obviously, given my background. You know, I didn't think God put kids into a situation where their mothers tried to shoot them and sold them to their grandparents for sex. I didn't think that was okay. I didn't think any God would allow that. And then I get told this by a family that apparently, and by a church that apparently believes in this fire and brimstone, and if you don't look and behave and repent for all these things that were done to you that are now your fault, what kind of God is that I want to be a part of? So when I started my master's in social work, I spent a semester in Bulgaria working with their legislature to develop the foster care system out there. Because of what I did there, I was then asked to go to Russia for a little while. And when I was working in Russia, I had never met people that had such the hearts of servants in the work that we were doing. And I spent a very long time talking to these women that I was working with. Why? They would talk often about their faith, and I would say, yeah, but why? Why? Okay, you say you have faith. We have 3 feet of snow in the bottom of the building. We're moving all the kids to the top floor. You know, the bakery down the street is bringing in food because we've run out of food. You can make a whole lot more money if you just move 5 hours south to Moscow. Why are you doing this? I know why I'm here. Why are you? Said, because this is how we serve others. This is how we serve God and serve others. And so it took me a little while to sit with that. And I talked with several of the priests in that town. And then I went and spent a month in Romania, living in a village run by the church, and talking more. I say talking, more arguing. Because I wanted answers. I wanted, why was this allowed to happen? Why am I supposed to be okay with this? Why do you talk about forgiveness? And I was told that I was able to take my time. So it took 8 years from when I initially started coming into the church to when I was charismated. I was able to find forgiveness for everyone except for my adoptive mother. That one is a work in progress, and my priest will not ask me about that unless I bring it up. But that's been a work in progress. And I've been able to come to a place of peace with it and happiness. And being told when I came in that it is absolutely okay to be angry at God. It is okay to curse at God. It is okay to scream and yell and fight with your priests, with Matrushka, until I'm able to come to a place of understanding. And they sat with me through all of that. And the rest of the congregation sat with me through that. Few cases. So I work in a very secular field where I'm at. If my patients want to talk about faith, I can do that with them, but I can mainly just listen. I've had a few, this is a specialty I never wanted to get, but I've gotten several patients who were victims not only of trafficking, but of satanic cult abuse. Working with those clients around faith has been a very difficult challenge. And that one's taken a lot of guidance from talking to my priest and talking to my godparents and trying to figure out what to say, because sometimes there is nothing to say. Because I don't, number one, in my role, there are things that I cannot say. But when I hear some of the details, which I'm not going to share with you, I don't know why God allows that to happen. I don't know why as a 7-year-old you were forced to do that. I don't know. And the not knowing is okay. As clinicians, as people of faith, there are going to be things that we don't know. And being able to sit with that and sit with the uncomfortability and hold the space for that person as they process that they may never have an answer to that. It sucks because we want to give finite answers. We want to give results, and we want to help, and we want to fix things, especially if you're a type A personality. We want to fix it. There's some things like that we can't fix. Kind of rabbit trailed on you there. I think I went into this one enough. Yeah. Church and faith as a barrier. So my church. So the other thing is I work 24/7. Unless I'm out of the country, I am on call for the police and the FBI 24 hours a day. And I'm also the lead soprano. So our choir master is very used to the 3 a.m. text of, I'm not going to be there, find somebody else. But they know if they don't see me for a few weeks, I've got somebody calling. I've had people show up at the door. So I've gotten a lot better at letting them know if I'm, they know my schedule. If I'm going to be out of town, that's fine. If I get a call out, something's going on at night, they check in. I also can talk to my priest confidentially about the things that go on, because there are times that, whether it's a case, something going on with the client, I just can't do it. I can't go in and sing Sunday morning when I've had to deal with something on Saturday night. I need to just lay in bed and cry myself to sleep and hope that I get some sleep. And they understand that. It's not me just not showing up. They understand the work, and they understand that it's personal. And it's one of the first places that I've been allowed to not be perfect. I mean, at Pascha, when they sprang that Serbian melody on us, I mean, good grief. I really screwed that one up. But it's been one of the first places I've been allowed to not be perfect. And that's actually been okay. And let me tell you, when Russians really love you, so I have an anaphylactic reaction to onion, I will die. There are always at least 5 dishes in coffee hour that have no onion in them. They make borscht with no onion. So, you're in with the Russians at that point. With the media coverage, with Epstein and everything else, I've been on the news fairly often. They know about it. They'll ask if I'm okay. And that's it. I'm a normal member of the congregation. We have all kinds. We have very right-wing Republicans, we have left-wing socialists, and we're all a little rough, most of us are a little rough around the edges. And I just get to fit in. And there have not been many places in my life where it's been safe to do that. So the cool stuff. If you're a clinician, you'll like this. So, EMDR, yep. EMDR is fairly well known as a trauma therapy modality for resolving complex trauma. So I spent a very long time on my dissertation doing it on EMDR. I had 80 peer-reviewed articles. I still have them. They are sitting on top of my dryer. And then I scrapped that 2 months ago. Scrapped most of it. And I'm redoing it. Same framework, but I'm changing the modality and I'm doing it around brain spotting. So I've spent a few years now getting trained in that. I've been asked to create a training for brain spotting and for brain spotting with human trafficking survivors. So without going into a lot of the technical stuff, just talking about the results from both a patient and a clinician angle, it allows for very, very fast resolution of very complex issues. It can trace back not only traumatic events, but traumatic core beliefs. And it has a very quick resolution rate with very, very low rates of going back to the level of intensity of the emotion surrounding the core belief or surrounding the event. So there are brain scans that have been done pre and post brain spotting to show how the brain chemistry is actually changing, and they will do 4 and 6 week follow-ups to see that that's maintained. And it's a fantastic modality. One of the things I think that was one of the greatest gifts that God gave us was the ability to have this neuroplasticity that the brain can heal itself. That even after going through all of that, the brain can still come out and be healthy and be happy and learn how to be a whole person again. The brain chemistry can change. The chemicals can go and self-regulate. And while, I'm going to still have bad days, it's a hell of a lot better than where it was. And that, the statistics are not good. When I hire people on my team, I am extremely picky. I want to make sure they're tough. I want to make sure they're rough around the edges. I want to make sure that they're okay with somebody getting up and screaming in their face, F you, because that's going to happen. And I tell them, very rarely are you going to get to see a happy ending. We don't see that here. Maybe every once in a while we will, but mainly we plant the seed and hope that further down the line, they're going to remember that and they're going to reach out for help. So, if someone like this comes into your congregation, comes into your church, into your place of work, into your friend group, I use complex PTSD as a diagnosis, but let's say survivor. Maybe they're public about that, maybe they're not. What are they going to see when they meet you, when they meet your congregation? I don't care, when they cut you off in traffic, how are you going to interact? What are you going to show them to let them know that this is a place of safety, this is a place of being welcome, this is a place to belong? And let me give you a hint, they will push you away. We don't know what it's like to have people like us for being us. We don't know what you want from us. So we're going to push you away at first. Then we'll let you a little bit closer. Then we're going to push you away again. Because we're going to test you until we know that we can trust you a little bit. So what do you want them to see? And how are you going to create that? How are you going to have a trauma-informed congregation, not just for survivors of trafficking, but for anybody who has been through any kind of trauma like this? Answer. Help me out here. I've been talking too long.
Well, I wish I could say that in my church we're going to see acceptance and love, but I don't think we are. I think in many churches today there's a lot of looking nice, dressing up, showing off, going to dance practice, basketball. And my church feeds the homeless once a month, and it's an inner city church. And a lot of women come in with their Johns to eat. And my church could do more, because that's once a month and run by the young adults. God bless them. But I think churches could do more in terms of welcoming in the body of Christ. I'd say, well, that in the suburban churches especially, that's not in my neighborhood. I never go to Annunciation. That's my church, because, it's down with the homeless. How can you go there? It's hard to park. Smells like shit. Okay, so, and that's my church, which is in the inner city, which feeds the homeless. Still, I think maybe education, like talks, like hearing you, might raise people's consciousness. I don't know, but it needs to be raised, I think.
I really liked what you said about trauma and cared congregation. Sure. I've been in trainings for that talk about trauma-informed care, and really the focus is how you say things. And I think a lot of us have good intentions to be loving and accepting. At least I'm going to make that assumption. And just because your intention is good to be loving doesn't mean what you're saying is not hurtful.
Absolutely.
And I think just the idea of being trauma and care, informed care, and you're not providing care as a clinician or practitioner, but how you're interacting makes a difference.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. It's being human to another human. That's who we're supposed to be.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Is this a church that you grew up in, or is it one you came? If you said, I didn't hear that.
No. So I came to that congregation, I think about 2.5 years ago now.
How long?
2.5 years ago. So, no, I grew up atheist. My adoptive parents didn't go to church.
I see.
So, yeah. That's kind of all I got, guys. So, if you guys have any questions or anything, and I will leave you on a happy note and get off of this. Hang on one second if I can figure out how to do that.
Yeah, we have about 7 minutes left for discussion, so yeah.
I want to thank you so much. So much.
Thank you.
And your bravery and your attunement and your journey touches me deeply. So thank you. And I really think the church can do so much more. I know my congregation is not very attuned to trauma, and I'm a survivor, and it's been very painful and difficult for me. So attentive listening would be a good place to start. And I really, really appreciate your journey. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
I too appreciate your story and all that you're able to share, because I know how difficult that is. I mean, I don't know personally, but I can appreciate what you're saying. What do you feel would be, the most important things as us as a church community in our particular parishes or generally as to what we can do? What's the best way that we can help survivors?
What's your name?
Monica.
Monica. Exactly what Monica was talking about earlier and what you were talking about. Having a basic understanding within the church community that people come in with a variety of different life experiences. Some people have been through hell and back, and and believe me, we have the 90-year-old Russian women in there first, so we get plenty of that too, but pull your head out of your ass. People do not need to be perfect in order to be in church. People do not need to be perfect in order to love God. We do not expect that by virtue of somebody being in the congregation and somebody professing their love for Jesus, that makes them perfect and that they are going to do a 180. And it doesn't mean that they aren't still going to carry pain. And to be attentive to that and to pay attention to that and to reach out to those people that you see are hurting, even if they don't want to talk, even if it's just being there quietly, but providing that presence and clinically holding that space and letting them know that that's a safe place, that the church is a safe place to not be perfect.
I just want to piggyback on that because sometimes we know people are hurting and sometimes we don't. And I have my own experiences where something might bother me and then I learn what's really going on in that person's life or whatnot. And then I'm just like, oh my goodness. And then my attitude completely changes, and like working on that and going back to the trauma-informed piece is that really going at it from a mindset that, like you said, we all have our struggles, and giving people grace and taking the judgment out of it.
Absolutely.
And you don't have to know that someone's struggling in order to give them that grace.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And to clarify, I wasn't telling you to pull your head out of your ass. I meant that in general. that came in afterward, and I was like, wanted to clarify that.
I truly did not take it that way at all, you know. But I just see our women, you know, I'm part of the national organization in any event, and we're trying to create a resource guide for how our churches, our women's groups across the country can help. And so one of the pieces, we're going to have an awareness section, we're going to have an action section, and a resources section. So it's not going to be perfect, you know, but at least it'll give people, you know, so you're giving me food for thought as to what I can do, you know. I mean, you can do something, you personally, by listening, trying to have some empathy, trying to give them some support in any way, which way you can. And there are other things that you can do a little bit broader, you know, in terms of helping the homeless or helping, victims, or supporting those agencies, like with, social work or counseling.
Absolutely.
That I don't have the professional expertise. Someone else does, but I can be supportive of that, agency or what have you that can do this kind of work. And it's not, as you say, it's a lifelong journey, and it's something that you have to, there may be a time that's more critical to helping them at least get over the beginning stages, but then there's got to be this continuous support that these people are going to need throughout their life's journey. So, whatever we can do in a, simple individual way, or in a, community way, or in a bigger national, global way, whatever we can do, we can offer them suggestions so that people have some idea of what they can do and be, helpful to that.
One commercial real quick. Emily is on a panel at 4:15 to further the discussion, please, about action in the church. So it's in the youth room at 4:15. That was my plug.
I think we're in 105.
Oh,
This
105,
is
sorry.
youth. I think we're in 105.
105.
Yeah, we'll figure it out.
We'll
We'll wander around. Yes, Father.
Emily, I'm Deacon Perry Amala, so we'll be on our panel together.
Oh, cool. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you as well. I apologize for coming in after you had started, so if you already addressed this, forgive me, but I don't think this is working. Oh, okay. I apologize. So I wonder, could you say a word about the role that our gender plays in being able to reach out? I know this is sometimes, some of us think of the church as a place where the priest or the deacon or the pastoral staff, the ordained, are the ones who are supposed to be doing the spiritual care, the pastoral care. And I wonder if you could just say a little bit about how that's a barrier, or how that, how we might be able to invite and include women more fully. And I'm happy to go in the direction of conversation about deaconesses if you want to go there, but even just to think about it in a non-ordained context.
Absolutely. That's and no, that question wasn't brought up. That's a fantastic question. I'll give you a general answer, and then I'm going to give you mine specifically. So what I have seen that has worked really well in my congregation, and then in congregations who are doing this well, is the lay women in the church. Those now are mainly my support network within the church. I'm very close with both of the priests, but they're my people. They're the ones who cook without onions for me. And they've been very intentional about continuing to gently push to build those relationships. So I think that lay women in the church, whether it be through a woman's group, whether it be through something less organized or more organized, can absolutely be a huge resource in that aspect. For me personally, I don't trust women. My first abuser was my adoptive mother, who sold me to her father. So I am getting a lot better now, but I generally, for a very long time, I could not trust women. So I had a much easier time interacting with males, and on a very appropriate level. But that was something that, for me, if I did not have that kind of access with my priest and with my godfather, it may have gone a different way when I came to Kazan. Because the one who initially, kind of was like, okay, you're one of us now, is Kolya, the man who became my godfather. So, and that's the priest's son-in-law. So, it's a very individual thing. So having all the options, if you can.
I'm asking a lot, but I like the subject. I've worked with men that were trafficked, and Bishop Nikitas, who works a lot in human trafficking, I had him come and speak at our church to raise our consciousness also. And I think that's a problem also, especially in the homosexual community. And I do think male clergy could help in that department, because there is as well, we don't want to just look at the women, but there are a large, especially in San Francisco, of males that are trafficked as well. So we don't want to forget that.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
I'm mindful of the time, but it seems like this conversation could continue in a later session. So I just want to thank you, Emily, for sharing that. We really appreciate it.